Alright, I thought I'd do a quick video on Brodie helmets, another one. This is not the first, it probably won't be the last, and it's been requested by one of our subscribers, Stephen. Thanks very much for the like, and I hope you find this useful. So Brodie helmets came into being in 1916. Some would argue that there were some available around 1915, but they came to widespread use in 1916 in terms of the Allied forces in World War One. So the Brodie helmet came about due to the increased likelihood of head wounds from trench fighting. Obviously, the bit that's near the fire, the path of a bullet is your head, and consequently there was a huge amount of head wounds seen, and it was a problem. So the Brodie helmet was brought in as an answer to that, and what actually happened was that the incidence of head wounds decreased in terms of fatalities, but it did actually increase in terms of injuries that were survived. So that was an interesting dichotomy, really, that fatalities decreased but incidence of head injuries increased. So what you could surmise from that probably is that the amount of the severity of the fighting is getting worse. More people are getting hurt in terms of injuries all round, including head injuries, but these helmets are making a difference and are saving lives. So I thought we'd have a little bit of a closer look at these Brodie helmets today. Now, as I said in the previous video, I'm lucky enough to have two of them, both of them being really excellent examples, both built to more or less the same specification. They are actually built by different manufacturers. So I thought what we do is we put them side by side. We're not comparing them particularly, but we are just going to take a look and use one as an example of the exterior and one as an example of the interior in order to be able to get a little bit of a more in-depth view of what these Brodie helmets actually are and what they do. So the broad brim, which typifies Brodie helmets, was designed with downward projectiles in mind. So you can see here this quite sort of broad brim here was designed so that when a shrapnel shell explodes in the air, then that shrapnel, those steel balls, which you know, are the sort of innards of the shrapnel shell, are blown downwards, and they're blown downwards onto the heads and shoulders of the soldiers below them. So a particularly nasty and fiendish example of military ingenuity. Not a new one for World War One. These things have been around for a while, but nevertheless pretty horrible when you think about it. So a great deal of the injuries that were happening were related to stuff that was raining down on soldiers. Shrapnel, debris, bits of brick, you name it. These things were cascading down on the head and shoulders of infantrymen in the front line. So that was why they had this kind of straight brim here. Now the Germans went a little bit of a different way, and I don't have a German Stahlhelm to show you beyond the World War II one. But the German Stahlhelm was very different. It had quite a broad brim on the front, but as you went around the side on the German helmet, what actually happened was it kind of dropped away into more of a sort of a neck protecting sort of seam, if you like, around the back, which also protected the ears. And the German Stahlhelm might be considered sort of oversized. It was like almost like a bucket, really, but it did provide really good protection all round, not just from downward facing projectiles, but also stuff that was coming in from the side and back. The Brodie helmet doesn't do that so much. It really protects you down to just around ear level, the top of your ears, really. These things are not capable of stopping a rifle bullet, except probably at the very limits of its range. A rifle bullet, and as a shooter I can absolutely vouch for this, a rifle bullet would go through this like a hot knife through butter. It would not stop any kind of bullet impact. Bullets, I mean, you're looking at 198 grain bullet travelling out of a Mauser rifle at probably in excess of 2,500 feet per second. That bullet is not going to be stopped by a thin piece of metal. It's going to go straight through the metal, straight through your head, straight out the other side of the helmet. But what these helmets were particularly good at doing was stopping, let's say, that bullet that has travelled 500 yards, hit something and ricocheted, then that would give you the protection you need, because that bullet has been de-escalated in terms of the energy it's got, and it would hit that bullet, hit that helmet, and it would glance off rather than hitting you in the head and killing you. So that's where these helmets came into their own. They were very much protection against all sorts of injuries that were apparent on the battlefield from other things. Now, just taking a look on the inside of the helmet here, so let's just turn the other one over as well, so you can see they're both very similar. The inside of the helmet, there's this kind of I don't know what to call it really, it's sort of canvas, I guess, this canvas thing here. I want to be very careful with it, it's extremely old and quite brittle. And then under that there's some netting here that you can see on the underside, and then you would use that netting to tighten it to kind of fit via this knot here. Now, being a bit careful in handling these helmets, because the stuff at the bottom of them actually has an asbestos content. Now, I know people can get really crazy about asbestos, but really, I mean, these just require a little bit of careful handling, really. That's all that's needed to keep you safe. Now, you'll see that there's also a strap. Now, this is quite a sturdy strap, actually, all things considered. And the British Brodie helmets, as I said in my other video, are secured. The strap and the bracket for the strap is always secured by a split pin. And you can see on both of these helmets there's the split pin. The American Brodies were the bracket was held on by a rivet. Okay, so that's the difference. If you see a split pin, in all likelihood it is going to be a British helmet. Okay, so there's your maker stamp there, and you'll always find a similar maker stamp on most of the helmets. There's the one here for this one. Okay, so these helmets, when they came in, became very quickly a kind of iconic feature of World War One. Whenever we think of troops, and particularly British troops really, we often do think of these Brodie helmets. Now, I am absolutely elated that I've got two of these in my collection. These are, I wouldn't say that they're rare particularly, but they are rare in good condition. And what makes these two a little bit on the rare side, I suppose, is that they weren't reconfigured for use in World War II. A great deal of these helmets were. They were taken into, you know, sort of into the stores, and they were refitted for World War II. These aren't. These are original World War One helmets with the World War One liner and the World War One strap. They haven't been sort of fiddled with or messed with. They are as they would have been when they came off the line. Now, in terms of dating these helmets, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here, and I'm going to say that these are 1916 helmets, probably mid to late, probably late 1916 helmets. Okay, so we're talking probably towards the tail end of the Battle of the Somme. I would say we're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe November, December of 1916. And the reason that I suggest those dates is because these helmets do have a rim. Okay, they have a rim that's going around the side of the helmet, and that rim is, if I can just show you, that rim is magnetic. Okay, so the top of the helmet is not magnetic. Okay, top of the helmet is not magnetic, but there are parts of it that are magnetic. The rim on both helmets are. Now, the reason that they stopped using metal that was magnetic in general on these helmets was because they didn't want it to interfere with compasses and other devices like that. So the very, very early helmets are magnetic. That's one way of telling them. They also were what's called raw edged. They didn't have this rim around the edge. This rim came later. Now, the rim is also only spot welded on in a couple of places. So it's very, very possible that a lot of these helmets will have that, well, might have had that rim at one point or another, and it's kind of fallen off. Sometimes you see them hanging off, you know. They're actually still well secured on both of these helmets. The other thing that these helmets are significantly missing is something called the donut on the inside of the liner. So the donut basically was a pad which was shaped as you might expect in the form of a donut, and it went at the bottom of the helmet in a sort of round circular fashion around the rivet at the bottom there. And the idea was that there wasn't really that much protection comfort wise if you had an impact from the top, but you were going almost straight through steel here, sort of into your head. So that donut provided a sort of a shock absorber, if you like, at the top of the helmet for any downward impacts. And that came in 1917, and we don't see that donut at all here on either of these helmets. So I am putting a guess that these are late 1916 helmets for the reasons that I've just given in terms of the observations around what constitutes their form. Two excellent examples of this iconic helmet. Neither of these are for sale presently. They're in my care and will remain in my care as just beautiful examples of a World War I Tommy helmet. So I hope you found that interesting. Stephen, I hope that gives you a little bit more insight into the Brodie helmet and you found that useful. If you like the video, please subscribe, please like, and tell anyone you can to follow. Thanks very much.